Morning, everyone. Welcome to session 5 of our Neurodiversity seminar series. This is the last in the series. It's a recorded Q&A session. So far, I think if we can pass through to the next slide, I've set out there the earlier sessions that we did with a link to the video of those sessions, which is on YouTube. So do access those links, have a look at the earlier sessions. Session 1, we looked at what is neurodiversity, how can it benefit your organization. Session 2, what are the barriers to entry and promotion within the workplace for neurodiverse staff. Session 3, lifting the barriers and removing the fear. Session 4, we had a panel discussion on lessons learned, and we looked at what the one main change that we thought employers could make in order to improve accessibility for neurodiverse staff into the workforce. And during the course of those sessions, we received a number of questions from the audience, which we didn't have an opportunity to deal with during that session. So we thought we'd draw them all together. We've sort of divided them into categories or taken questions which exemplify particular topics which people wanted to discuss. And that's what we're going to discuss today. So first off, I just wanted to introduce you to our speakers. We have Gillian Burgess-Smith from Inclusive Environments Limited, Jack Fitzpatrick, who's an independent EDI consultant, trainer and speaker. Elizabeth Norman International Limited. Liz will be talking to us about her experiences running running matters from the recruitment side, and myself. I head up the employment team at Edwin Co. We can go to the next slide. It's a very short introduction. I frequently act for individuals and companies who are navigating their rights and obligations under the Equality Act in relation to disability, which has particular relevance for neurodiverse staff. My pronouns are she and her, and my values are honesty, transparency, and empathy. And I'm going to hand over to Liz.
Hi. I am interested in diversity for a number of reasons, not least of which I'm dyslexic. But my main reason for being interested as somebody who runs a talent consultancy is I am aware of the massive shortage of talent. And there is a massive pool of people out there that we are not accessing. And it's mad when we are so short of talent. So, please employ more people from that pool. And I'll hand you on to Jack.
Hi, I'm Jack Fitzpatrick. My pronouns are he and him, and I'm an independent EDI consultant, trainer and speaker. I'm a person with lived experience and have just completed my BA Honours degree in Education Studies and Inclusion. I identify as neurodiverse and have a diagnosis of autism and dyspraxia from the age of 3 years old. My values are honesty, integrity, and inclusivity. I'll hand over to Gillian.
Thank you, Jack. So I'm Gillian. I'm actually the founder of Inclusive Environments Limited. I'm an architect by trade, but I often say if I wasn't, I'd probably be a psychologist. For me, it's always been about looking through the lens of the individual and really sort of practicing human-centric design. 3 years ago, I was diagnosed with an incurable brain tumour, so I actually became neurodivergent myself, and realised from an environment perspective, actually we could be doing a lot more within businesses, cultures and the environment to enable everybody to reach their full potential. So my pronouns are she and her, and rather than titles or labels like an architect, I often talk about my values. So I'm a good listener, I'm a very caring person, empathetic, and I have a lot of patience.
Thanks very much for everyone introducing ourselves. We're going to go straight into Q&A, which I'm going to field to our various experts. I think first off, and sort of looking at it from the recruitment perspective, Liz, one of the questions that we got in, a lot of them about recruitment, but they sort of say, look, we can see the advantages of employing a greater percentage of neurodiverse staff, but how do we attract them? How do you actually access neurodiverse staff? And I know Gillian and Jack will have some contribution to make in relation to that, but Liz, I thought we could kick off with you on that question.
Well, for me, the number one thing you have to do is address internal culture. So you have to make communication within the organisation about neurodiversity of a high priority. Make it absolutely normal for people to feel it's okay to talk about their, you know, the fact that they have ADHD or they are dyslexic or they have a brain tumour. Because if people are not comfortable with coming forward, you can't do anything to support and help them. And until
How do you show that externally, Liz? I mean, would you advocate saying, you know, we encourage applications from neurodiverse individuals on application forms and that sort of thing? It's sort of getting that message out. If you get the culture right, as you say, how do you then get it out externally?
Well, something I thought of, which is possibly not quite answering your question, is actually thinking about the inclusivity of your profession as well. So some professions are seen as being old-fashioned, traditional, not very inclusive, which includes recruitment and possibly lawyers. So one of the things that you can do is start working with professional organisations, associations, and talk about how you as a profession address it. It's not just an individual company thing. That's certainly quite important. Then you can think about all your comms. So your website is a very good start. Advertising is another area that you can look at. And as you say, you can say that you welcome inclusivity. But I suppose my point about internal things is that you can add that, and lots of companies do, but it's more than that. If that's all you do, it won't really help. Certainly
walk the walk, essentially.
Yes.
Just talk the talk.
Yeah, actually talking about sort of walking the walk, one thing that I would recommend is that you almost put yourself in the lens of somebody that is neurodiverse if you want to attract them into the organisation, and think about what their journey would be like from applying for a job, from coming to the interview. So what sort of what feeling do they get when they walk into reception? Does it feel comfortable? Does it feel like a sort of a friendly organisation that's very open with its culture? You can create receptions that actually could be really diverse to people and completely put them off, or it might be that they actually would prefer to sort of meet you one-to-one in a coffee shop. So really be open and to sort of listen to individuals. And I think I agree with Liz, it's sort of, there are three things really. It's firstly around community, so create this open and inclusive culture. And think about leading from the top, but often those middle managers don't get the training or get left out. So it needs to make sure that it goes through everybody within the organisation. Partnership, so identifying ways to actually improve that lived experience. So it might be campaigns, both internally and externally. It might be knowledge exchange. It might be bringing in sort of students to try jobs. So you have trainees coming in, having an unconscious bias program. So for people that may be doing hiring, you might identify that they have their own bias. So you might give them unconscious bias training to, again, enable them to be more open to sort of welcome people in. And then also look at essentially, dismantling that sort of stigma around it. And then the third key point I would say is probably around policy. So shaping your policies and procedures, including the recruitment procedure, to ensure that, all talent thrives within that organisation. So it's not also just about attracting, but it's also about retaining and motivating.
Yeah.
Sorry, Jack.
I'd like to expand on that. Actually, it's actually looking at the entire employee life cycle. So everything from entrance into the organisation to exit of the organisation, such as exit interviews, but also how do we attract and develop and retain staff in there? So for instance, an example of this was when I was at the Neurodiversity, a New Paradigm conference last Friday. There were some fantastic speakers there in Liverpool. And a couple stood out to me as having absolutely fantastic initiatives. An example being the Ernest Young EY's Neurodiversity Centre of Excellence, in which they have alternative recruitment processes and help people have on-the-job training. Another one was AstraZeneca, in which they've got a Thrive Neurodiversity network there as well, to show and demonstrate that they have commitment to the organisation. And also, yeah, it was a great demonstration of showing how many employers are committed towards this. Another example being the Sunflower Lanyards, in which this was an initiative that was developed originally in the airport, Heathrow and Gatwick Airport, which I'm also wearing as well, in which the development of this has become really rapid and has become an international initiative now. When I was working with Aggregate Industries, they helped their neurodiverse staff or staff with hidden or unseen disabilities within the organisation to have personalised lanyards with the company logo on the bottom of it to show commitment that the organisation was committed to their disabilities and to value their staff. Another example being specific certifications and accreditation. Now, there's 3 levels of particularly disability confidence scheme that the government have developed to demonstrate at which point of the journey, of the EDI journey, that companies are at. Now, the first level is disability confident committed, which companies must demonstrate that a recruitment process is inclusive and accessible for all, ensuring that there is effective communication to promote vacancies and a guaranteed offer to interview disabled candidates. The second level is disability confident employer, which is about getting the right people for your business and ensuring that inclusive recruitment policies are in place, as well as ensuring that the organisation is keeping and developing diverse talent. So this is part of the recruitment cycle. And the third level, which is the highest level, is disability confident leader status. Now, there's 3 aspects to this leadership status, in which challenge leadership and reporting on disability, mental health and wellbeing. So in terms of challenging, you have to have a self-assessment validation and showing by whom it was, and your validators agree with your evidence and assessment that has been conducted, and that you are delivering against all of the core actions as a disability confident employer, and that you're employing disabled people at all levels within your organisation. Leadership is providing a narrative of the activities that you have or are taking part in support of being a disability confident leader. And finally, reporting on disability and mental health and wellbeing is by referring to the voluntary reporting frameworks that are associated with the accreditation. You are taking action to report and record on disability, mental health and wellbeing in the workplace. There's also the Mindful Employer Charter run by NHS England for mental wellbeing in the workplace, the Business Disability Forum accreditation, and also social enterprise CIC disability employment marks, as well as the National Centre for Diversity accreditation, such as the Investors in Diversity Award, Leaders in Diversity Award, and Masters in Diversity Award as well.
I think this accreditation is interesting, isn't it? We looked at it, I think, in session 1, didn't we? It was that I'm, as a lawyer, I tend to sort of approach things with a stick and sort of say, you know, if you don't, you know, get your house in order in terms of equality and diversity, then, you know, these are the sort of risks that you run as a business. But I thought accreditation was one of the carrots in this, in a sense, because a lot of companies that want to work with you are now looking at your accreditation and your profile, aren't they? And you know, see that it aligns with their code of ethics and you know, their moral compass as well. So
I agree. I think an essential part of this is employee branding, and accreditation really helps with that. And as Jack has said, there are numerous bodies. There are lots of others that Jack hasn't mentioned. I think that's a very good thing to do. And part of that is about the whole employee brand, because what you don't want to do is look like you're employing someone on a token basis. Somebody wants to feel that they are genuinely joining an organisation that is truly inclusive and that is going to support them going through. And accreditation definitely helps with some of that.
And I think that one thing that's really interesting is that a lot of organisations now are thinking about DE&I, and typically they start with gender, then race, but actually if you look at neurodiversity, essentially brain different, actually you are covering all of those protected characteristics. So it's a good place to start. And the other thing I think when we think about attracting neurodiverse talent, and it's something, I know that Liz, you've had an experience of through these seminars, and I have as well, is that people are reaching out not just because they are neurodiverse in the workplace, but they are parents of children that are neurodiverse, and then they are trying to survive in the workplace as well. So this is actually, it starts with the children as well, and so it's a holistic area that we really need to look at to improve.
Very, very good point. It definitely starts with trying to support schools and educational facilities and things like that. Well, Linky, just to quickly go back to your question, which is how to attract talent, can I just mention a couple of other things? First of all is the job description. You've got to get that right. It sounds really basic, but actually you're sending that out to people. And if that is not inclusive in terms of language, it's very prescriptive in terms of the things needed, it will put a lot of people off. So I just wanted to mention that. And then when you're advertising, there are things that you can do again to make sure that you're not putting off people that have that are diverse in all sorts of ways. And again, that's partly language. It's partly about setting expectations, not making people feel they have to have certain things that are probably not even necessary, and they may not feel that confident about. So there's a lot that you can do in that area, and in fact possibly even move away from advertising. So work with some of these groups, some of those sorts of areas.
I mean, it may be sort of the economy has changed such that people are prepared to be less prescriptive in terms of what's required, qualifications wise and that sort of thing, and think a bit more imaginatively about it. But I mean, I know that a number of my employers would say, well, look, if we weren't prescriptive about saying we need a degree level first or something like that, we'd end up with too many applications that just, from a practical point of view, we wouldn't be able to deal with.
But then give people intelligence tests. That's what my nephew has just got into medical school, and they can't do it on A-level grades because increasingly they're so high. So they actually, before they even look at the A-level grades, before they take the application, they give all prospective medical students some sort of personality intelligence test, which is something that can't be revised for. So it doesn't matter which school you went to. And what it is doing is assessing innate ability. There are things like that you can do. You just need to challenge them.
And that's an online sort of software, is it? That they send to them and they do at home sort of thing, is it?
Do that's a good question. I don't know. It must have been online, mustn't it? Because it was sort of about 9 months ago. So I assume it was online,
I expect there's quite a bit of research about the... they always used to criticize, the sort of IQ test, didn't they? And say, oh, well, look, it's very sort of middle class centric and that kind of thing. And therefore sort of excludes sections of the population. But I expect there's a huge body of research on those sort of online intelligence tests as well.
I think also that workplaces are, because there have been changes since COVID with more activity-based or hybrid workplaces or working from home, actually a lot of people realised that prior to COVID, when they were in the office all the time, they actually in some ways used to mask, or they used to actually perform within the space provided for them. What they realised during COVID working at home is actually they created spaces which work for them. So whether it's lying on a bed working, or a sofa, or whether it's having an environment which is really dark or really bright, and so now the workplaces that are coming out which talk to more activity-based settings are actually sort of enabling more people to become employed if they are neurodiverse and have some particular sensory processing differences.
We'll come to this in a bit more detail, actually, Gillian, because it's pertinent to a latter question. But before we move on to that, I think touching on the Liz's sort of suggestion of these online intelligence tests, one of the other questions that we got is, what sort of tools are available, and what other sort of approaches can be taken to that recruitment process to make it make sure that appraisal and assessment is a fair process for neurodiverse applicants.
One of the things I wanted to pick up on is Gillian talked about bias training, and I've just been aware to conference and we've been talking about this because I spoke on a webinar about bias training, and I was shot down by a lot of psychology experts who said that actually you can't train people on bias. And so my question was, well, what do we do then? Because it's obviously an important issue. And I was told that actually it's right, you can't train people, but you can make them aware of bias. And of course, there will be some people that won't want to change. But a lot of us, if we are taught through bias, will suddenly think to ourselves, oh yeah, no, I am biased about that. I am biased about education. Actually, I think as a recruitment consultant, I've been a bit of an education snob because, as you say, it's an easy way of screening CVs. So I just wanted to pick up on that point. There are a number of other things that you can do. One of the ones that I mentioned already in the webinars is that a client of mine provided the questions in advance to somebody that was dyslexic because they realized that they weren't going to be very quick at thinking on their feet. But actually the job didn't need somebody that was quick thinking on their feet. It needed somebody that had in-depth analysis, and it could be over time. So, you can look at that. Psychometric testing is another one. Gillian's brought it up before, a more relaxed interview environment. And by that, Linky, because I know you're going to shoot me down, but it's got to be measurable. It can be measurable, but still in a more relaxed coffee. It doesn't have to be a formal table. I'm a huge fan of competency interviews, which is where you don't ask questions directly. You actually talk around an innate trait that you are looking for, and you get that person to discuss it in a comfortable way, and that enables them to show off their talents without feeling under an awful lot of pressure. It also enables them to draw that skill from all areas of their life, not necessarily in the working environment. I mean, there's been a lot of research on it, Gillian's probably aware, but it is shown to be that much more accurate than a straightforward, old-fashioned
And so those are the sort of questions you get in interviews which say things like, can you discuss a situation in which you have organized a team and obtained a successful outcome within a time limit or something like that? And
although that's still quite direct. You might have picked up that they play football, or in Jack's case, he's just been doing a degree, presumably with a group of other students. And then you would explore how he interacts with those other students without even necessarily mentioning the word team, but and what his role was, you know, as part of that group of people. So it's working things out in that way, and then you have to write down what the answer. So you have to have a very set question in your head, and you have to write down. You have to score them against that question and write down the evidence for why you gave them that score. So it might sound relaxed, but actually it's very measurable.
Yeah.
Could I add a comment on this as well? So when I was working with aggregates, we were looking at, you know, the recruitment process and how, you know, we can make it as fair as possible and inclusive as possible for people. And we found these recruitment tools that removed or helped to add in inclusive language. So removed non-inclusive language by flagging it up like a spell checker, but then showed you alternatives for the particular language to make it, for instance, gender neutral, inclusive, no orientation type of thing associated with the language. So yeah, it was a really helpful and useful tool, and it helped them to create, you know, really good and well-structured job applications without having to, you know, without having to put much effort in then afterwards, because the tool helped you through artificial intelligence and aided you to help construct the perfect job description.
Well, that's brilliant. I've never heard of that, Jack. That's just brilliant, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, we actually use it, and Jack's right, it is brilliant.
Really?
But it's, to me, it is more than language. So that is helping you with the language, but it's also about the approach. It's also about thinking about just making it friendly and welcoming, and not putting in, as I say, too many excessive skill demands that not everyone's going to have and are not truly necessary. But yeah, Jack's absolutely right. The other thing on that tool thing is just generally measuring. You know, I think it is so important to measure the sort of applicants you've got, and then think, okay, how do we improve this? But unless you've measured it in the first place, you don't have any way of seeing whether what you're putting in place is actually improving it. And a lot of the tools that Jack's talking about actually do both. They do the advertising, but they also do the measurement.
One thing I'd be quite interested in is if I drafted a job description, Liz, can you put that through the system?
Yeah.
And we'll sort of, because I think it would be quite nice to sort of, maybe we can add onto the slides which we put on with the video, is to illustrate exactly that, the use of that software. I'd be really interested to see the sort of changes that it makes to make it more inclusive. So I'll have a stab at drafting a job description. I mean, I won't make it too extreme. You know, we want a nice young chap to work in our sector. It would be really
have a first-class degree.
Linky, so on that, actually, it was really interesting because when they did the demonstration for us when we were about to acquire that piece of software, they did show that. They used gendered language. They used
age, I bet. A lot of age.
Yeah. They said we're looking for a young, inspirational leader. And it uses, and it even removes that leadership style language as well, that very corporate language. It also removes qualifications. So it kind of helps to take away those barriers that sometimes are in place for people, like saying must have a master's degree or higher, or must have a PhD to put that in, you know, put that in the job description. but actually it's helped to de-bias that and got more diverse clients, diverse applications for that role. Another thing that I think is important as well, and we tried it a while ago, was blind CVs. Now that is it's a very hard thing to do, very hard thing to do, but it's interesting to see what people's perceptions are just from some information in front of you. But yeah.
I have again a lot of experience of blind CVs, because I would say now about 20% of my clients ask us to send in blind CVs. Actually, I'm not a great fan, and there are two reasons. First of all, it makes it very difficult for the client, if they don't know what the background of the applicant, to measure the applications and see how they're improving their performance, because they just don't have the information to start with. They're totally reliant on us doing that for them, which is fine, but we're often not the only source of applicants for that particular job. So that's my first objection. But the second one is that I feel this is only pushing the problem down the line. So if I am dyslexic, which I am, that's completely hidden. In fact, actually, it is completely hidden, because it's not something I would choose to put on my CV. But that, if the company are not aware of that, then they won't be able to adapt the interview process. And often, something about your diversity comes out at interview. You haven't actually, you A, haven't adapted the process, and B, you might, if you're not inclusive right the way through, it might almost come as a bit of a shock. I mean, it might be better to know that somebody is autistic before you actually meet them, rather than suddenly being confronted with somebody who is autistic and you've done nothing to adapt the process to help them. So personally, I'm not a big fan. I can see the plus side, but in reality, I think it's very difficult to make that work.
And it's really about getting people to be open about their needs, because we're not saying that everyone needs to disclose. And if they are disclosing, it's not because it's an illness, it's just a brain difference. So it's about understanding what people need to do their role, and maybe having more than one person on the review panel as well. So it's not just being sort of interviewed by one person with maybe certain key biases, but it's about creating a safe space, isn't it, I think?
Yeah.
Which leads me nicely onto, I'm just conscious of time. But actually it's interesting, because our discussion is sort of drawing in quite a lot of the questions that we did have. But Gillian, you touched on the sort of working space, and certainly, questions that we had were about adapting the working environment, and what can be done, what extent do we have to do it, is anything, what if somebody wants to work from home, all the time because they prefer working from their bed? Those sort of questions have been, so that's your space really, Gillian, your sort of architectural background. I just wondered if you would make some comments in relation to those sort of workplace adjustments.
Yeah, certainly. So firstly, I think the point I'd like to make is that neurodivergent individuals are all unique. So there is that saying that if you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism. So understanding individuals and what they need and allowing them a safe space to be open is really important. But I would say typically when we've designed organisations in the past and spaces, we've designed to sort of the neurotypicals, which is sort of like this area. And when you look at people that are neurodiverse and sort of the spiky profiles that they have, essentially what we're not doing is listening to people that are on this spectrum. And I think if we do listen to these, we can actually make the space better for everyone. And the example I give is often around wayfinding. the sort of story that when I'd gone into a building and I'd asked where the toilets were and I'd sort of wayfound to the space, and I turned around to come out and there was like 3 doors. I didn't know which one to exit. I could have had a stroke, a seizure, panicking. And if organisations had better wayfinding, that would make it easier for everybody. If, for instance, they didn't just use capitals in their wayfinding, it would make it easier for people that are dyslexic to understand the different sort of spaces. If they thought about a variety of different spaces, including putting sensory rooms in for all of us now. So not just somebody that might be still neurodiverse and needs to go and decompress or have some time out. It might be that somebody that's neurotypical has had that train journey in from hell and wants to get into the office and go to a space where they just need to decompress. So when people talk about adapting the work environment, what I would like to do is for them to listen to how people use the space and what they need and adapt the environment to make it better for everybody. There will be individuals that require specific adaptations, and we've talked about access to work and those type of things, but in relation to all of our sensory processing, noise is a particular one. We were going into offices and you see people sat with headphones in an open plan area and you think, well, they're not going to be overhearing what they need to, because the idea of open plan is to overhear and sort of learn more. But actually, a lot of people need to wear noise cancelling headphones to allow their brain to function. So it's about behaviour and etiquette and the environment. So it's not just around the physical space, but there are definitely things you can do within the physical space to do with wayfinding, signage, acoustics, sound. We often forget that corridors are really noisy places, but we never put acoustics in corridors. And there are lots of other examples, almost like a checklist of things when I walk around a building and just say, look, why don't you try this? Having an area off of a noisy area that people can sit, that maybe want to be part of the social space but not in the middle of it. We've heard from a lot of people that we've been doing research with that if you have ADHD, for instance, you can't work in the middle of an open plan space because you're hypersensitive to everything happening around you. So having sort of chairs that have their backs to the wall or booths where people can work from. But I don't think it's always around specific adaptations. I think it's about creating an environment which has these variety of different spaces where everybody can reach their full potential. But one thing I do want to be mindful of, so any employers that are listening to this and are thinking about non-assigned desking, a lot of people that are on the spectrum and are neurodiverse actually have a lot of routines that they have to do already in the morning to get ready to go to work, for instance. And if they have to add another routine where they're actually having to get all their stuff, put it on a desk, set it all up as they want it, take it all down again, and it's not there as they need it to be able to perform, that can also be a hindrance. So for those that are thinking about desking policies, maybe enabling people to book desks at a length of time as opposed to just a day might help some of those people that are neurodiverse, because I recognise that we can't have desks for everybody when people are going into the office for different reasons now, and less going into the office. But there's assumptions that if you're neurodiverse, you don't want to go into an office, and the people we've had absolutely do, because they miss those social cues from the office. So we just have to be mindful of creating a different suite of spaces and behaviour and etiquettes so that everybody can perform based on the activity that they're doing and their particular needs.
I just want to add one thing there, which is it's all brilliant advice, Gillian, but as somebody that runs a small company, I think, oh my goodness, how am I ever going to get all of that done? It's just, it sounds too much. It's very daunting. So the first thing I would say is listen to your people, talk to them, and it will be different, as you rightly say. So you don't need to do all of those things. But if they work with people like you and they work with their own staff and just focus on the things that are make their particular office environment inclusive for their particular staff, that's a good start. But the other thing is access to work. I'm a huge fan of access to work. It means that you can get £70,000, which is a lot of money towards adaptations. You can't just generally get it. You have to have it in relation to a particular individual and the adaptations that they need in order to enable them to work. But of course, if you were employing more than one individual, that's 70,000 times however many individuals there are. So it's a lot of money. And I've known it be used in very interesting ways. Something that we've talked about before is often when you get somebody new starting that is neurodiverse, it's very difficult to get them initially embedded, get them the social support, get them, enable them to feel that they are contributing to the team as a whole, get them into the right routine, get all the practical things that they need. And I came across somebody who's a nurse, and what she was doing on the NHS, unfortunately they've stopped it, but you can do it through access to work, is she was accompanying somebody for the first 6 weeks just to get them all set up, working with the employer, working with them as an individual, so that they felt comfortable that they have been onboarded in every possible way to support them. So yeah, access to work.
And I think you're absolutely right. Treat it as an experiment. We're not all going to get everything right straight away, and you can't do everything at once. But if we do sort of small steps and get feedback as to how things are working and move on, it's really around sort of creating this great lab almost, where people can bring their full selves to the office.
Yeah. And I think the only other thing that I would add from a sort of legal perspective is, making these adjustments is a legal obligation. It's very likely that somebody who is neurodiverse does satisfy the legal definition of having a disability, even if they, it's a hidden disability and it's not obvious when you first meet them. And if you're dealing with disabled staff, you have a duty to make reasonable adjustments, and they are reasonable adjustments, Liz. So I sort of always think about my kind of working from home example, and I sort of think, well, really, do we really have to let them work from home, 24/7? And the answer is no, you don't, but you have to identify what your legitimate aim as an organization is that requires them to come in, and what would be reasonable to meet that legitimate aim, but alleviate the disadvantage that they suffer. And if the answer is 1 day a week or 2 days a month, or you've just got to think about it sensibly and look at what are your needs and what are their needs and where can we meet in the middle. And if the answer is we can't meet in the middle because they can never travel into work, well, then it may be, depending on the type of the work they do and what your organization sort of culture and ethics are, that actually that's just not a good fit, and they've got to find another organization where there's absolutely no problem working from home full time. There are lots of online. In fact, I think Indeed, the sort of online recruitment company now has a whole division on home working, and it puts together companies that want home workers with people who want to work from home. Presumably bred in the times of COVID, where people started having a bit of a different attitude to it. So you've just got to find the right fit, as it were. I'm conscious of time. We've got sort of 9 minutes left, but one really interesting question which came up was somebody said, look, data scientists is a role that you sort of naturally expect neurodiverse people to particularly flourish at, but can we give other examples of professions that neurodiverse individuals are particularly well suited to? And I thought that could be a slightly inflammatory question, but Jack, over to you first.
So in terms of this, I think that there is a general stereotype associated with that, but actually many people, including myself, are working in many diverse different fields. A really, really interesting article to read is by the Harvard Business Review, published in 2017, and it's called "Neurodiversity Can Be a Competitive Advantage." And it talks about, from many different people, from many different perspectives, from SAP, Hewlett-Packard Enterprises, Microsoft, from many different companies, the importance of having neurodiverse staff. So in terms of this, there's a quote from about Hewlett-Packard Enterprises. Sorry, I'm just trying to find it.
Finding it.
Yeah, while you're finding it, Jack, I
Yeah,
can just.
I've got it now, sorry. So not surprised, I'd like to read this out. So not surprisingly, when autistic people with those sorts of qualifications and credentials, degrees, PhDs, different things like that, and come from many backgrounds, do manage to get hired, many turn out to be very, very capable, and some are really, really great. Over the past 2 years, Hewlett-Packard Enterprises program has placed more than 30 participants in data scientist testing roles at Australia's Department of Human Services. Preliminary results suggest that the organisation's neurodiverse testing teams are more than 30% productive than anyone else in their departments. And it shows that neurodiversity can be a real benefit and advantage. However, as Gillian said, once you met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism, and neurodiversity can vary. So many people have different strengths and talents. Some have leadership skills, some have soft skills, including empathy, which is meant to be believed as a weakness, but can sometimes, with intensive support, be a strength for people to understand and see and position themselves in other people's shoes, basically. And yeah, so for me, for my background, from having a diagnosis at the age of 3 to now having a first-class honours degree from John Moores University in Education Studies and Inclusion, and the possibility to study a PhD, it's a real honour to do that, you see. So different people have different strengths, and that's what I'd like to say. And people go into different backgrounds who are neurodiverse.
Yeah.
What Jack has done there is he's mentioned a number of companies like Microsoft and SAP, and it is true that tech companies seem to have jumped onto this quicker than other areas, other professions. But the only reason for doing that is because they are the ones that are most short of skills. As somebody who recruits data scientists, let me tell you, we are really, really short of talent. And they were aware that this was something that they can do, but every other profession can do exactly the same. And in fact, my brother is dyspraxic. I haven't told him I'm saying this on a webinar, so I hope he doesn't mind. But he's a very successful doctor. You know, that's a completely different area. There's a lot of evidence to show that people who are neurodiverse are likely to think of things in a slightly different way, and therefore are often very creative. Now, that's a long way away from data science. And again, within my area, I know people that are qualitative researchers, which is sort of as far away from numbers as you can get, but they are neurodiverse, because what they're using, innovation is another area, what they are using is their different way of thinking and their creativity. Just on a final note on that, I just mentioned that I've been at a conference. I realized that actually a lot of, well, not a lot, but there is an increasing drive towards recruiting recruitment consultants, particularly at the resourcing end, with autism, because they are methodical, they're thorough, they've got good memories, as Jack says, empathy. All of those sorts of things are absolutely crucial when going out and looking for candidates. So, you know, really everywhere.
And just because you shared, Liz, as well, my brother doesn't know this either. So my brother is also on the spectrum and has dyslexia, and he's a chef. So that's another key skill. I would say graphic designers that I've worked with as well for their visual, their 3D thinking, teachers, policy advisors, copywriters, video content creators. Jack and I know an amazing video content creator who also works in TV and the movies. Again, very creative out there. He did our welcome video. Innovation, you mentioned sort of innovation and entrepreneurs as well, quite often are on the spectrum. So yeah, another one. So I would say, you can do anything. Just understand what your skills are and share them with everybody, be open.
I mean, it's interesting.
Sorry.
I was just going to say thing.
From an organisation point of view, I sort of feel, it's a bit like that old debate about why do you need women in the boardroom, isn't it? And the reason you need women in the boardroom is because they do bring a different way of thinking, and that strengthens the organisation in terms of the decisions that are made. Likewise, that's why you need BAME. That's why you need people from different socio-economic sort of experiences. And this is absolutely no difference. An organisation gets stronger because everybody is bringing something to the party so that the end decision is better. And that's ultimately the objective for any business, isn't it? Is to make sure that the outcome and the end decision is better.
Diversity of thought. Absolutely.
Yeah. The strongest teams are made up of different individuals contributing different things. The last thing you want is a whole group of very similar people.
Yeah.
A bit like this group.
We are right up against our hour, which we said we would spend. I think actually in the discussion we covered off a lot of the other questions that came out. But one thing the four of us have been talking about is our 21-day challenge. And we will have a little regroup, I think. I mean, Jack, for instance, you mentioned an awful lot of accreditation organisations today. And I can see it would be really interesting for everybody just to sort of get a list of those, and they can research them in their own time and that sort of thing, and the access to work that we've spoken about. You've also referred to a number of different articles in that Harvard Business Study report that you did. And I think that we'll include all of that in our 21-day challenge, where for those who want to sign up, the four of us are going to put together just a couple of articles, links to videos, that sort of thing. We'll do a few each day for 21 days, and those who are interested can just access it, educate yourself, raise the awareness in your own time. But thank you so much to Jack and Liz and Gillian. It's just been such a delight doing this seminar series with you. And thank you very much for everybody who has watched our videos and attended the seminars.
Perfect. And I would just like to make a challenge to everybody listening. If you could just think about one thing that you could do to improve things for people that are neurodiverse, either within your organization, within your life, within your community. If you could start doing that tomorrow, that would be fantastic.
Just one thing. I like
Just
that.
Yeah.
Fabulous.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.